By the time the hotel manager realized who she was, he had already called security on her twice. He did not apologize right away. People like him rarely do. He stood behind the front desk of the Harrington, one of the most expensive hotels in downtown Toronto, and he looked at the woman in the worn canvas jacket and said, very quietly, that perhaps she would be more comfortable at a property better suited to her needs. She did not flinch. She did not raise her voice. She picked up her phone, made one call, and walked to the window that faced the lake. By the following morning, the Harrington had lost its primary corporate account. By noon, 2 board members had resigned. By 3 o'clock, the story was on every major news feed from Halifax to Vancouver, and she was already on a plane to Vancouver Island, thinking about something else entirely. Her name was Camille. Not Camille from any of the old stories people tell about women like her, but Camille Osi Boateng, 43 years old, born in Scarborough to a seamstress and a bus driver who worked opposite shifts, so one of them was always home. She grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment where the radiator knocked all winter and the carpet in the hallway had been patched with electrical tape for as long as she could remember. She did her homework on the kitchen table. She shared a room with her younger brother until she was 16. She knew what it felt like to wear the same coat 3 winters in a row and pray it still closed. She also knew what it felt like to build something from nothing. To stay up past 2 in the morning writing code when the apartment was quiet and the city outside the window sounded like a held breath. To pitch to rooms full of people who looked through her like she was furniture. To hear the word no so many times it began to sound like punctuation. She had heard it 41 times before she heard yes. She kept a list. That was something her mother had told her to do. Write down the no's, because one day you'll want to know how many it took. 41 no's before a small venture capital firm in Waterloo gave her the seed money to build what would become Luma Systems, a data infrastructure company that, by the time Camille was 39, had contracts with 4 provincial governments, 2 national banks, and a healthcare network that covered more than 2 million patients across northern Ontario. She did not talk about the list in interviews. She did not talk about the coat, or the radiator, or the electrical tape in the hallway. She talked about the work. That was always what she wanted to talk about. The work, the problem, the solution, the next thing to build. She wore the same kind of clothes she had always worn. Canvas jacket, dark jeans, clean sneakers. She did not own a watch that cost more than $60. She did not own a watch at all, actually. She checked her phone. She was checking her phone when she walked into the Harrington on a Thursday afternoon in November, rolling a small carry-on behind her, wearing the canvas jacket, hair pulled back. She had a conference the next morning, a keynote address to its room of 800 people, and she had chosen the Harrington because her assistant had booked it, and she had not looked at the name before she arrived. She would think about that later. No, she would think about what it means that a place can look like nothing has changed in 100 years and still believe it's earned the right to decide who belongs inside it. The lobby was the kind of lobby that is designed to make certain people feel certain things. The ceilings were high. The floors were marble. There were 2 enormous floral arrangements on either side of the reception desk. White flowers. Very tall, very stiff, the kind of flowers that are never allowed to be in the process of becoming anything. They arrive arranged and stay that way until someone removes them. There were 3 people ahead of Camille in the check-in line. A couple in resort wear, matching cream linen, the kind that somehow never wrinkles, and a man in a gray blazer who was on the phone and clearly annoyed about it. She stood behind them. She checked her email. She thought about the opening line of her keynote. The man in the blazer finished his call and stepped to the desk. He had the ease of someone who had been checking into hotels like this his entire adult life, the kind of ease you can't practice, you can only inherit. He and the clerk, young, blonde, practiced smile, spoke like 2 people who had already agreed on something. The couple in linen went next. Then Camille stepped forward. The clerk's name tag said Harrington Associate. Not a name, just a title. She would wonder about that later too. I have a reservation, Camille said. Ozzy Boateng. The clerk looked at her screen. Then she looked at Camille, then back at the screen. I'm sorry, she said. I'm not seeing anything under that name. It would have been booked through a corporate account. Luma Systems. One moment. The clerk stepped away from the desks. She went to a door behind the reception area and disappeared through it. Camille waited. The lobby was doing what lobbies like this always do, playing soft music at a volume designed to make you feel like you're intruding on something, like the ambiance itself would prefer if you stood elsewhere. 2 minutes passed. Then 5. The clerk came back. She was accompanied by a man in a navy suit, older, 50s, the kind of square jaw that has always gotten its own way. His name was Raymond. She would learn that later. At this moment he was simply the man in the navy suit, and he was looking at her the way certain people look when they have already decided the answer is no and are now simply working out how to say it. Mrs. Ozzy Boateng, he said. Not a question. Yes. I'm Raymond Holt, the front desk manager. I understand you're looking for a reservation. I have a reservation, she said. I see. The thing is. He paused. He looked down at the desk. He looked back up. We have been experiencing some difficulties with our third-party booking systems. It's possible there was an error on that end. My assistant has the confirmation number. Of course. But even so, I'm afraid we're running at full capacity this evening. We do have some availability later in the week. Or, I'd be happy to recommend. You have a suite available, Camille said. I can see the listing on your website right now. It updated 4 minutes ago. She turned her phone toward him. He looked at the screen. Something passed across his face. A quick rearrangement. The way a person looks when they have been caught at something and are deciding how to feel about being caught. He chose to feel nothing. That was the decision. She watched him make it. I apologize for any confusion, he said. He did not sound confused. He did not sound apologetic. He sounded like a man reciting a line from a manual he had memorized some years ago and had not reviewed since. Perhaps we can look into alternative accommodations that might better suit my needs, Camille said. You were going to say needs. He looked at her. That's what you were going to say, she said. That I find something that better suits my needs. He said nothing. I'd like to speak with the general manager, she said. I am the senior manager on duty this evening. Then I'd like the name of the general manager. His jaw tightened. That would be Mr. Forsyth. He is not available Peter Forsyth. But as I said, thank you. She turned away from the desk. She sat down in one of the chairs near the window, the kind of chair that is placed there for aesthetics, not sitting, and she called her assistant. She asked for Peter Forsyth's direct line, his personal email, and the name of the Harrington's parent company. She was given all three within 90 seconds. She did not leave. She sat in the chair, and she made her calls, and she waited. What she was feeling, sitting in that chair in the lobby of the Harrington in November while the soft music played and the white flowers stood at attention, was something she had felt before. Many times, it was not anger, exactly. Anger is too hot, too reactive. This was something older than anger, something she had first felt at 16 when a store security guard followed her through a pharmacy for 11 minutes. And she had stood in the vitamin aisle counting his footsteps, understanding something about the world that she had already suspected but now knew for certain. It was the feeling of being asked to prove that you exist. Not just that you belong in a particular place, that you exist at all, that the space you take up is real, that your reservation is real, your name is real, your life is real, that you are a person and not an inconvenience. She had felt it 41 times before she stopped counting. She did not call it anything. She just sat with it, the way you sit with an old injury you've learned to carry. You know exactly where it lives, you know the shape of it, and you know it will pass. On the other side of the lobby, behind the same door that had swallowed the clerk and produced the manager, a young woman named Daisy was watching through the small rectangular window in the door. Daisy had been a front desk associate at the Harrington for 7 months. She was 26. She was studying hospitality management at Ryerson, and this was her practicum placement. She had grown up in Mississauga, the daughter of two Nigerian immigrants who had come to Canada in 1993, with two suitcases and a list of people they didn't know. She knew what it looked like when someone was being handled instead of helped. She had been handled before. She recognized the shape of it. She watched the woman in the canvas jacket sitting in the chair by the window, phone to her ear, entirely still. She watched Raymond Holt straighten his jacket and return to the desk as if nothing had happened. She watched the clerk look at her screen and not look at the woman by the window. Something pressed at the back of Daisy's memory. The woman's face, the posture, the way she held herself like someone who had decided, a long time ago, not to take up less space than she needed. Adeze had seen that face before. She was almost certain she had seen it. She thought about it for the rest of her shift. She thought about it while she processed two more check-ins and answered the phone twice, and brought a guest a printout of the local restaurant guide. She thought about it the way you think about a word that's on the tip of your tongue, not desperately, but persistently, like a small knock that won't stop. It was not until 8 minutes later, when she was refilling the pen caddy at the side desk, that she looked down at the conference brochure she had picked up from the countertop display earlier that day. The conference at the Metro Toronto Convention Center, the one that had been bringing so many guests this week. She looked at the brochure. She looked at the photograph on the front cover. She read the name under it. She read it again. She put the brochure down very carefully, the way you put something down when your hands are not entirely steady, and she stood very still for a moment. The woman by the window was Camille Osei Boateng, founder and executive chair of Luma Systems, ranked 47th on the Globe and Mail's most recent list of most influential Canadians. Former recipient of the Governor General's Innovation Award. The woman who had, 2 years prior, donated $18 million to expand computer science programs in underfunded schools in Northern Ontario, Southern Alberta, and the Greater Montreal area. Worth, by the most recent estimates, somewhere north of $400 million. She had walked into the Harrington with a carry-on bag and a canvas jacket, and Raymond Holt had tried to send her away. Adeza's first thought was not about the money. It was about the woman in the vitamin aisle. Not a specific woman, a composite. Every woman who had ever been followed, redirected, questioned, explained to, managed. Every woman who had ever had to prove that her reservation was real. Her second thought was practical. She needed to do something. She went looking for the duty manager on the East Wing, a woman named Petra, who had started the same week Adeze had, and who would later tell her own version of this story at every industry event she attended for the next 6 years. "You need to come to the lobby," Adeze said. "I'm in the middle of, you need to come now, and you need to bring the guest services binder." There is a version of what happened next that Peter Forsyth, the general manager of the Harrington, would later tell in carefully chosen language to a reporter from the Toronto Star. In that version, the situation was the result of a miscommunication, a software error, an unfortunate confluence of factors that had since been addressed. There is another version. The one that happened. Camille was still sitting in the chair by the window when Adeze crossed the lobby to her. She walked quickly but not frantically. The walk of someone who has made a decision and is not looking back at it. "Mrs. Osei Boateng," she said. Camille looked up. "I'm Adeze. I'm so sorry." She said it the way you say something when you mean it, which is different from the way you say it when you've been trained to say it. "I have your reservation here. Your suite is ready. I'd like to personally take you up." Camille looked at her for a moment. She looked at the way Adeza's jaw was set, the particular rigidity of someone who is holding something difficult with both hands and choosing not to put it down. "Thank you, Adeze," she said. She stood. She picked up her carry-on. She followed Adeze across the lobby toward the elevators. Raymond Holt, at the front desk, did not say anything. He watched them go. He looked back at his screen. He smoothed the front of his jacket. In the elevator, Adeze stood very straight and looked at the floor numbers changing above the door. She had 11 floors to decide whether to say anything else. I recognized you from the conference brochure, she said at the fourth floor. I should have recognized you when you came in. I'm sorry I didn't. Camille looked at her reflection in the elevator doors. That's not your fault, she said. No, Daisy said. But what happened at the desk was. She did not mean herself. They both understood that. The suite was on the 14th floor and it had a view of the lake. Camille stood at the window for a long moment after Daisy left, looking at the water in the dark, thinking about the opening line of her keynote. She had been planning to open with a quote. She changed her mind. She opened with a story instead. She did not sleep well. She rarely slept well the night before a major address. She lay in the enormous bed in the suite at the Harrington and looked at the ceiling and ran through the words in her mind, rearranging them like furniture in a room you haven't quite figured out yet. She thought about her mother. She thought about the radiator that knocked all winter. She thought about Raymond Holt looking at her, the way people look at something they have decided is not worth the time. She thought about Adeze, crossing the lobby with her chin up, carrying something heavy in both hands. At some point, she fell asleep. She woke at 5:43. She made coffee. She opened her laptop and made 2 calls that she had been meaning to make since the previous afternoon, and which she now made with a kind of quiet clarity that comes from having decided something overnight without quite realizing you were deciding it. The first call was to the executive offices of Meridian Capital Holdings, the parent company of the Harrington Hotel Group. Meridian Capital Holdings was not, as it happened, an unfamiliar name to Camille. It was a name she had sat across a table from 6 years ago when she was negotiating the terms of a major infrastructure contract that had, ultimately, not gone to Luma. It was a name that had, at that time, suggested a different vendor might be better suited to their organizational culture. She remembered sitting in that boardroom. She remembered the shape of that sentence. Better suited. She had heard it before. The second call was to her legal team. She showered, she dressed. She took the elevator down to the lobby at 7:15, carrying only her phone. She walked past the front desk. Raymond Holt was not there. The clerk from the night before was not there. A young man she hadn't seen before was processing a checkout for a guest in a business suit. She walked through the lobby and out through the revolving door and into the November morning. The lake was gray and flat and enormous. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking at it. Then she walked to the convention center. She was the 8th speaker on the program. She sat in the green room with the other speakers, drinking water from a paper cup, scrolling through nothing on her phone. The speaker ahead of her was a fintech founder from Calgary who used the words disruptive and ecosystem 6 times in 11 minutes. She counted. Then she walked onto the stage. 800 people. The kind of audience that has heard a lot of keynotes and knows, within about 45 seconds, whether this one is going to be different. She stood at the podium. She did not open with a quote. She said, "Yesterday afternoon, someone looked at me and decided I did not belong where I was standing. He did not know my name. He did not know what I did, or who I was. He only knew what I looked like." The room was quiet in a particular way. The quiet of 800 people deciding to pay attention. "I want to be clear about something," she said. "That has happened to me before. It will probably happen again. And I am not standing here this morning to tell you that it stopped mattering to me, or that I am beyond it, or that success made it easier to bear. It did not. It does not." She paused. "But here is what I am standing here to tell you. I built something anyway. Not to prove a point to anyone who looked through me. Not to make them sorry. I built it because the work needed to be done, and because I was the person who could see how to do it. And because I did not see any reason to let someone else's failure of imagination become a limit on mine." There was a moment of stillness. Then the room broke open. She did not stay for the reception after. She shook 3 hands she needed to shake, thanked the organizer, and slipped out through the side entrance. She was in a cab before the applause had fully faded. What happened at the Harrington over the following hours unfolded the way these things unfold now. Not slowly, not privately. Someone in the audience had posted a short clip of the first 90 seconds of her address. By the time her cab reached King Street, it had been viewed 40,000 times. By the time she arrived at Pearson, it was 200,000. By the time she boarded her flight, the comment underneath the most shared version read simply, "The hotel she's talking about is the Harrington downtown. My friend works there and confirmed it." Meridian Capital Holdings issued a statement at 11:47. It used the words deeply and regrettable and full investigation in close proximity to one another. A reporter from the Star called Peter Forsyth's office at noon. He was not available for comment. By 1 o'clock, Luma Systems communications team, who had not been asked to do anything, who had simply been watching the same feeds as everyone else, confirmed quietly to two different journalists that Camille Osei-Boateng had made calls to Meridian's executive offices that morning, and that the relationship between the two companies was under review. The Harrington's corporate account with a national telecommunications firm, one of Meridian's most significant hospitality clients, and a company whose CFO had been in the audience at the convention center that morning, sent a brief email to the Meridian team at 1:45 p.m. It said, "Given recent events, we will be pausing new bookings with Harrington Properties pending a review of our partnership." By 3 o'clock, two other companies had followed. Adiezi was on a mid-afternoon shift when the calls started coming in to the front desk. Not guests, but journalists, asking to speak to management. She processed 3 check-ins and answered the phone twice and kept her face entirely neutral, which was something she was good at, which was something she had learned. Prist, Raymond Holt was removed from the duty roster before she finished her shift. She was told this by Petra, who said it in the careful, quiet way that people say things when they are not sure what they're allowed to say. Adiez nodded. She went back to work. She did not hear from Camille directly until 4 days later when an email arrived in her personal inbox. Not her work account, her personal inbox, which she would always wonder about, the specificity of it, the small deliberateness of choosing the right address. It was 3 sentences. "I wanted to thank you personally for what you did. You didn't have to cross that lobby. I know it, and I imagine you know it too. I won't forget it." Below the signature was a note about a scholarship fund, a new one, set up through Luma's foundation. For Black students in hospitality management programs across Canada, the inaugural cohort would be 12 students. Adiezi read the email twice. Then she sat very still for a moment. The way you sit when something settles into you that you didn't know you were waiting for. She thought about crossing the lobby. She thought about the decision she made in the time it took to walk from the back office door to the chair by the window. She thought about the fact that she had been afraid, not of losing her job, exactly, but of something harder to name, the fear of being wrong, of misreading the room, of stepping into something she couldn't step back out of. She had done it anyway. She forwarded the email to her mother. No message, just the email. Her mother called her 12 minutes later and cried, which was something her mother almost never did, and they talked for 45 minutes about nothing in particular and everything that mattered. The Harrington story ran in the Globe and Mail, the Star, CBC News, and 17 regional outlets over the following week. Most of them focused on Meridian's response. Some of them focused on Camille's address. One of them, a small independent outlet based in Halifax, focused on Adiez. That one Adiez saved. She kept it in a folder on her desktop next to the email. She did not look at it often. She did not need to. She knew it was there. Camille did not give interviews about the specific incident. She had said what she needed to say from the stage, in the room, on her own terms, and she did not feel the need to add to it. Reporters asked her assistant. Her assistant sent the same response each time. Ms. Osei-Boateng has addressed this publicly and has nothing further to add at this time. She was already working on the next thing. That was what she did. That was what she had always done. You encounter the wall, you note the shape of it, you decide what needs to happen next, and then you get back to work. The work does not stop because someone looked at you wrong. The work does not stop because someone tried to redirect you to a property better suited to your needs. The work is the thing that was always yours. No lobby, no manager, no practice smile from behind a marble desk can take it from you. She was on a call with her head of engineering when her assistant forwarded her the first piece about Adeze. She read it quickly, between two agenda items, and she felt something loosen in her chest. Something small but real, like a knot that has been there long enough that you forgot it was there until it wasn't. She sent a brief reply to the article's author. 4 words. Thank you for this. Then she went back to the call. The city outside her window moved the way it always moves. Continuously, indifferently, full of 1,000 stories happening at once. Most of them invisible to everyone except the people living them. Somewhere on King Street, a woman in a canvas jacket had walked into a building and been asked to prove she existed. Somewhere, in a back office, a young woman had looked through a small rectangular window and decided to cross a room. Neither of them would call it brave. That was the thing about it. That was always the thing about it. You do what you do because it needed to be done. Because you were the person standing there. Because the work does not stop. Because some things cost nothing to give and everything to withhold. And the bill for withholding them always comes due.